Okay, I think that's it, man. So, Jaron,
Yes.
what are we doing here tonight at the Actors Warehouse in Gainesville, Florida?
Well, we, as friends, we started out as friends through story. Our friendship has grown a lot, not just because we built a company and our profit together, but because we've had the opportunity to share a lot of ideas and thoughts and grow together on our different lived experiences. And I think the reason why our self-narrate meetings last so long is because before we even really get started on what we're doing that day for the business, we do check-ins. And so we're often saying, things that we're going through, things that we've experienced, things that have happened within our community, national news, and a lot of them start with us talking about Kanye or Chance, and then it evolves into something a lot greater than just music.
Yeah.
But we have a lot of deep conversations about race, about religion, about lived experiences, and diversity and inclusion. And usually we'll pull in our wives, we'll pull in anybody that's around, and just be like, come on, well, the self-narrative meeting's over with, but we still want to talk about this. And we share so much. And at the end, we always say, man, we should have recorded it.
Yep.
So it's like, why not? It sounds perfect, We create a space where we are very comfortable. I think that we both feel that we can be open and honest and vulnerable to understand each other.
Yeah.
Not judging, and from that, we've grown tremendously as friends, but also gain understanding of each other's perspective and lived experience. So
Yeah.
I think in recording this might help some other folks who may not have that bond with someone that they could have that conversation with. But also we'll grow from it, and we hope to get feedback from the audience and you all who watch this. So let's know what you all think, and let's continue these conversations and grow the conversation so that we're all grounded in story and understand how to listen to each other's needs, wants, lived experiences, differences, and similarities. So it makes sense that self-narrate, we still do that, and it's evolved into something that we can grow from these conversations. So it's pretty dope.
So what you're watching right now is the first of what we are hoping to be a semi-regular video series that we're currently kind of trying the title Community Conversations. And these conversations are going to be informal. They're going to be between Jaron and I and maybe some invited guests in different spaces around town. And today we're at the Actors Warehouse, which is a really amazing theater that if you haven't been here, you really, really should. Yeah. Located right in downtown Gainesville. And the name Community Conversations actually comes from an experiment that Jaron and I tried. These conversations that Jaron's describing, where we talk openly and honestly and vulnerably about very heavy issues, very big topics, without any judgment. We worked to invite a group of open-minded and interesting people to come together to dinner a couple of different times. The goal was to do it monthly and expand it out so that the entire city could be invited to these events. Well, we eventually realized our ambition was a little too much for what we could handle at that time, because
everybody was busy. Man.
Everybody was busy. I've got 2 kids. It's hard to plot out a month, an evening every single month where we can all get a bunch of people together at a restaurant and then hope that there's a big enough table for everybody and that the conditions are just right. So
the good thing is when we did do them,
yeah,
we outgrew the tables.
Right.
So the few times that we did have it, we had great conversation. We saw that there was a need to continue these. And so hopefully pretty soon we'll start to find spaces with bigger tables. And bigger venues so we can actually continue this work. So
that's where this video series came from. We said, well, if we can't meet in person with a large group of people, perhaps we can capture these conversations between the two of us, between, again, maybe selected invited guests in the future. And really tackle some big, heavy issues in a raw, vulnerable way from our two different perspectives. And to be clear, we're going to be talking about things like race. We're going to be talking about potentially big political issues, and we're going to be coming at it not from the perspective of either one of us is right, or that that one version of a lived experience is better than another lived experience, but a place where we can learn from each other. So you're watching a video right now that's kind of been a lot of explanation. Future videos will be much more getting right into the conversation. But I think to kick off this video series, perhaps we can maybe share a story each about a lived experience that we've had as it pertains to race, as it pertains to these issues that we're going to be discussing in these videos. Sure. To kind of set the tone, I know that I have one offhand that I would share, but I want to know if you have anything before. Sure. I don't want to just assume and jump right into it.
You're good. Yeah, I kind of have one. I think it was the first time I identified or had to come to the understanding of race. I was very young. And so I got one.
Okay. Side note, if you hear any laughter or conversation happening that's not us in this video, we were very graciously given this space right before they're doing callbacks. So some things may happen that we weren't expecting, just to throw that out there.
Keep that organic community feel.
Exactly. It's a community thing, community conversations.
There we go.
Jaron, why don't you tell me the story that just came to mind?
Sure. A story that really fuels my passion to do diversity work and create spaces for people to come together and listen to each other, or for people to know that they're good enough, no matter what their lived experience is. We're all good enough. Probably started when I was a child, very young. I grew up in a very small town, Winterville, North Carolina. For those who have no idea where Winterville is, it's right beside Greenville, North Carolina. For those who have no idea where that is, home of the East Carolina Pirates, about an hour and a half to the right of Raleigh, North Carolina, on the East Coast. So, very small space. Basically, everybody knew each other. And there were things that when you grow up in a small town, you don't notice until you get older. And then you start to notice that there are differences, there are things that happen. So in Winterville, up until this point, I never noticed that the railroad tracks really separated parts of town.
That's so what's the word I'm looking for? Cliche?
But but at the same time, we didn't even recognize that because the whole town was so small. We all went to the same elementary school. The majority of us went to the same middle school, and all of us either went to two high schools. And so, so either way, we all knew each other. And that was cool. It was really cool. And it had its pros and its cons. And I think that when I was in elementary school, the one place where everyone would get together and have a good time was recess. Duh, it's the only place, that's the highlight of the day. Recess and lunch. It's hard to believe that lunch, cafeteria. Anyway, it was nice. So at recess, we used to play football, soccer, basketball, and we had like a jungle gym and all this stuff, but all the guys loved to play football. And so I think I'm in the first grade, and when you play football, usually it's on teams of people that you kind of hang out with or you walk to school with, but you still played with everybody. And so I didn't recognize it at the time until the situation happened that the communities were playing the communities, and we were still all friends, so there wasn't a big thing. Until one day, one of my friends from the opposing team came to the group of my friends and said, we can't really have you play with us anymore. I can't really play with you. And share the football, whatever. And so he had the football that we will always use. Really good football. It had an East Carolina pirate on it. It was purple and gold. I still remember that football. It was perfect. You could really throw a good spiral with it. So everybody loved that football. And we loved playing with each other. Until he said that he couldn't play with us anymore because his mom said that he smelled black. Right. Yeah.
What does that even mean?
Well, when you're a first grader, you have absolutely no idea what that means. And I literally stayed a block away from campus, from school. I had no idea what that meant. And it hurt because there was so much confusion and it just felt dirty. Not that I felt dirty, but just that whole, what do you mean we can't play because you smell black, you know? And so I had to know how to process that. And I asked my teacher, could I go to the bathroom? And I ran home. I ran home to my grandma's house. And my grandma was at home, and I think my grandfather, he was out at work, and my mother was at work. And so I run home, and I'm crying. I'm like, Grandma, I don't really know what this means. I don't really remember. I just remember hearing that over and over and over and reciting that in my head, like, what does that mean? What does that mean? And so my grandma, you know, she immediately got up and got to the rotary phone, you know, and turned. She called my mom, and she's talking to my mom, and I could just see my grandma telling my mom what was going on, and I could see her now thinking back. I know what that face is. It's okay, I have to tell him that there are things that are wrong in the world. Not with him, but there are situations and there are spaces where you have to have the talk. And I don't think that they expected to have the talk in the first grade. And so my mom came home, and then my granddaddy came home, and he was an alderman, which is kind of like a councilman. And mayor pro tem. So if the mayor for some reason wasn't there, he served in that capacity. So he was always in the community, always working with folks. And so he came home and talked to me. Mom came home, grandma came home and talked to me. And I'm just crying. I don't know what's going on. So also grandma calls back to school and says that I am home. Because by this point, they're like, Jaron's been in the bathroom for a pretty long time. So I'm also terrified I'm going to get in trouble with my teachers, right? So everybody comes home, they sit me down in the living room, and, you know, essentially they say, you know, there are some spaces in the world where people can say some things that make no sense, but in their head they believe is right or wrong. And that ignorance is never a reflection of who you are, and you are never those lies. And for me, I just couldn't understand how someone would say something like that or live in that way, because up until that point, I never saw a separation of group. We didn't realize that all the people I played football with on this side of the team was black and this side was white. It really wasn't that. It was everybody on the side of the railroad tracks that I walk home with that we always see. We were playing together versus that neighborhood. But it wasn't a racial thing until that moment. Mm-hmm. And that's when it kind of elevated and heightened this feeling of like, it was weird because I was privileged in the position to have a family that had experienced it for so long, still dealt with it on a daily basis, and was still trying to build community. Like my grandfather didn't just represent those on one side of the railroad tracks. He represented a better Winterville for everybody. Mm-hmm. And so it was interesting, even his relationship with the mayor, who was a white man, they were very close. And so I had the opportunity to be around people who poured into my cup when I felt very empty or that my cup was dirty and it was of no fault of my own, who helped me to wipe that off and said, this isn't who you are. This is not you. This is ignorance, this is hatred, this is learned behavior that does not make sense, and a lot of it comes from spaces that they can't even identify. It might have been something that was passed down from them, but whatever the case may be, it's not true to who you are. So now I'm going back to school the next day, and it was different. Recess was different. There was the line. The railroad tracks meant more than just the railroad tracks now. You start to wonder why. And we didn't play with them for a while. But what was interesting is that we still had classes together. We were still always around each other. And my mom and his mom had we all had a little conference at school. And his mom said, she had no idea where he got that from, where he learned it, and it wasn't said in the household.
Mm-hmm.
That could be true. I don't know. But regardless of the fact is, we still were around each other. So we tried to figure out, he apologized. I accepted the apology. I could see in his eyes that he had no idea how much it hurt me. And that was interesting. Because months later, we all still played with each other. It was like that happened, like that behavior was taught, but there was a part that we didn't want to accept. He recognized what it did, and I don't think he owned it and decided that was going to be a part of his learned behavior. So there was good that came from that. And interesting enough, we all went to continue to go to the same middle school, continue to go to the same high school, and throughout sports still kept us together. And we were undefeated in middle school, very good in high school, and so we were all still in the same town. So we identified issues that were ingrained in the town, but I think for a lot of us, we had the hopes that we could make it better. And I think that over the years, you'll continue to see it get better as long as we have these types of conversations. But there are several places and spaces where people have never had the first conversation, and they don't know how to have the first conversation. Or it didn't happen in the first grade, it happened when they were in their 20s,
Yep.
And now it's time to unpack. Where did all this behavior come from? Or how do I open myself up to have a conversation from a different perspective when I've looked at it through this lens for all these years?
You have just
Yeah.
naturally segued into my story.
Perfect. Let's hear it.
For me, there is no clear defining one moment where these issues came into clarity. And that really shows my privilege, my white privilege. I'm going to drop that term right now in the first episode. It shows my white privilege, really, that I never had to think about that. The fact that I never had to think about that is a privilege.
Yeah.
And something that, I didn't know that with terminology until a few years ago, but the reality is, I never really had to think about race. I never had to think about the color of my skin or if anyone was going to judge me growing up because I'm white, or I should say maybe that someone was going to judge me unfairly because of the color of my skin. I never even had to think about that. Honestly, it wasn't until a couple of experiences that happened kind of around the same time when I was in my 20s that I even had to address any of these issues because I started to see that things were not the same for me that they were for other people. And one is a little bit goofy and the other a little bit more serious. I realize as a storyteller that this story does not really have the typical beginning, middle, and end. But sometimes big issues like this can't be summarized in one individual anecdote, but rather are a series of unpackings, like you said.
That's true.
So for me, I went to Bonnaroo a few years ago.
And what is Bonnaroo for those who are not
Okay.
musically?
All right, Bonnaroo is one of the country's biggest music festivals. It's essentially a modern day Woodstock that happens every single year. And one of the things that people are known to do at Bonnaroo, not me, I promise you, is to do every drug and a lot of those drugs. And so because of that, police have realized that they can, in small counties especially, that they can fill their quota for arrests each summer in the month that Bonnaroo is by pulling over for no reason people that look like they're going to Bonnaroo. I've been to Bonnaroo twice now, and on the drive from Florida to Tennessee, I've been pulled over each time. 1 second. Hello, are you here for the callbacks? Okay, cool. They're in the back. So anyways, Bonnaroo. Both times that I'm driving to Bonnaroo from Florida, which is many hours, it's in Tennessee, I get pulled over in the same county in Georgia. I want to say it was Butts County. And it's like a little rural county, and you can actually look up the statistics. They get a lot of money from pulling over Bonnaroo attendees and confiscating their drugs and arresting them and getting like legal fees from them. In fact, I know somebody who did get caught and got 2 felonies in Butts. Ooh. So wherever you are out there, sending you my love and my thoughts. But anyway, so I got pulled over twice, and I would tell this story, and I thought it was ridiculous that I was getting profiled. And I was told by some people that I knew at that time, like, and just as a side note, the things I got pulled over for were ridiculous. One was following too close to someone. When's the last time you heard anybody getting pulled over for following too close to someone? And I was not following too close to someone, I want to point that out. And the other time was for tapping on the dotted line in between 2 lanes. Things that you would never get pulled over for otherwise, right? To be clear, I didn't have anything on me, so they let me go. Yeah. But long story short, that experience was really pretty harrowing to feel that I was being profiled, that the police were pulling me over because I had camping equipment in the back of my car. So I started talking to some people about that, and I'm like, start to realize that is a normal occurrence for people that don't look like me.
Yeah. But it's interesting that you had that experience, because at first I've never heard a story like that, or an experience that in some capacity you similarly experience what I experience a lot when I travel. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting, like, because even with the profiling of it, it wasn't in a positive. It was with the intent that there was some wrong going on. And so you being able to have that experience, not a lot of people have that, or have that ability to know what that feels like. And so a lot of it is using imagination to wonder what that feels like, or try to. So the fact that you have had that experience, that helps you to kind of understand a little bit deeper than some other people. But even you sharing that,
well, the thing is people have told me that the term for this is DWB, getting a DWB, driving while black. Mm-hmm. For me, in this case, it was driving while Bonnaroo. So yeah, he didn't know that was coming. Clearly,
driving while Bonnaroo. That's pretty good.
So, anyways. So that experience was eye-opening, followed by I was working at an event at my normal job, which is my day job, which is I work at the University of Florida doing live streaming of special events. And I sat in on a lecture from the woman whose name I cannot remember at this time, who wrote the original paper on white privilege back in the 70s, I want to say, 70s or 80s. It was the invisible knapsack, unpacking the invisible knapsack. Do you know what I'm talking about? Well, anyways, if I remember to do this, there'll be a little bubble underneath my face right now that says what this is and who that person was. But she coined the term white privilege, and so she laid out this idea of, if I'm in a public place, I can go about my business without any expectation of this, and this. I can reasonably assume that I'm not being taken advantage of based on the color of my skin, or that I don't have to pay higher rent because of the color of my skin, or that just this long laundry list. And she's a white woman herself. And I sat there thinking, wow, I've lived my life experiencing like, these are the things that I've never even thought about, but that people that don't look like me have to think about regularly or on a daily basis. It really shook me. And then the final kind of blow was a couple of years ago. Was it 1 or 2 years ago? The kind of rash of police shootings that we're getting.
Oh yeah, about a year and a half ago.
Yeah. Everyone remembers when there was a report, it seemed like every single day on the news, about someone being shot by the police who was black or dark skinned. And I remember feeling so guilty. I had no reason to be. I was not part of any of these things. I was not. I live in Gainesville, Florida. We didn't have anything like that happen here, and yet the stories were so racially motivated. Racially, like the discussion was all around white skin, black skin, police.
They should have listened.
All of these things.
Like, what?
I felt so complicit. And maybe I should. I don't know. But the thing is, I felt so guilty and I didn't know what to do about that. I actually started seeing a therapist about this. And that was honestly right around the time when you and I started to have open conversations about race and about our lived experiences and about our perspectives. And I listened to your stories and learned from your experiences, and you listened to me and helped me to understand things that maybe I'd never had experience with, and vice versa. And it really showed me that even to this day, years later, there is no like, okay, I am woke now. Yeah. I am officially like, I am ready to live in this world without any kind of bias or prejudice or being like a fully enlightened person. Yeah. It's a continual learning process and listening and sharing process. So I don't, again, these moments in my life, there are so many more little things that happened. It doesn't tie up neatly in a bow as like one moment or one experience or even 3 clearly defined steps that led to a realization, but they are definitive moments where I can point back to and say, this is where something changed for me and inside of me.
Yeah.
And I feel as though I am probably not the only person out there who has had these moments and these realizations. But I do feel very lucky that I have someone that I can share them with, and that is you. And so, on that very emotional note, we are going to kind of tie this video to a close, because frankly, as you might have noticed, we had a cut. People are starting to come in for the callbacks. But I did want to ask if there was any other thoughts that you had on these combined conversations that we've had.
I think one too. I do want to mention kind of when those shootings happened, that there were different experiences that happened in that week. So while you were going through those emotions and feelings that you were having, I was going through a lot of emotions and feelings as well. My lived experience through that time varied in that my emotions were, I cried a lot. And there was a lot of trauma in a lot of communities through actively viewing these deaths on social media.
I couldn't watch any. I still to this day have never watched the actual videos.
That so and also too, when we talk about our lived experience, we also want everyone to remember that it is our lived experience, not everyone's lived experience. We don't represent everybody and everyone's thoughts and opinions and emotions and feelings. But these are the emotions that I was feeling myself.
Hey, the callbacks?
What's that?
Are you here for the callbacks?
All right, so we had somebody else come back for callbacks. So I was saying that, our stories that we share and our perspectives, we don't represent every black male, every white male, every black or white person, every heterosexual experience. Like, we don't represent all that. We are giving it from our perspective, from our lived experience, our own lenses. And so we hope that you can pull pieces from this that you might find beneficial. But don't use these to say that, they discussed the whole, black experience. This is what every black guy thinks because that's what Jaron's, and so.
Or that this is what every white guy thinks.
Right, and vice versa. But the more stories you hear, the more perspectives you hear, the better you can understand everyone's experience is different, but there may be some similarities and familiarities about each story. So don't feel that what we do is, and what we talk about is the truth for everyone. And that's a big part of understanding each other, especially when we talk about issues with race and gender and big issues like this. Is we want people to just be right or wrong. We want it to be black or white. It's never black and white. It's always gray.
Yeah.
And understanding and having the conversation within that gray, that's how we learn how to communicate and live with each other, and respect and value each other and the voices that we share. So back to that week where we had those shootings, there was a lot of experiences, emotions and feelings of hurt and just trauma and just tears. I was just tired of seeing people who looked like my cousins, my uncles, me, and it was like, how does this happen? Like, still, like, they said that if before it was, the body cameras weren't on. And now it's openly filmed, and it should have been, he probably should have listened or complied. And it's like, at the end of the day, there's a life that is gone. That's a brother, that's an uncle, that's a father, that's a community leader, that's a potential mentor. That these people aren't coming back. And so when they took the soul from the person in the way that they talked about these issues, it was very disheartening. But also, I had to watch it because as I travel, I want to know what they did wrong, because you become paranoid and terrified. So there are a lot of spaces where there are a lot of people of color who have this fear of police officers because there's trauma associated with it. We had to watch it to see what they said they did wrong. We knew that it still didn't justify or warrant a loss of life. But if I didn't watch it, it's like, what did he do? And so he was reaching for his actual identification for his concealed carry. And so now you have a concealed carry. You can't even do that, right? So it was a space where you freeze up because you do get profiled. And so it's almost like research. How could I possibly get profiled here? And you'll find several people of color, especially when they travel in the South. I'm sure it's probably up in the North, but I know in the South, there are several rural spaces and several open places where people haven't had to make an adjustment, make a shift, change their perspective on life because they may not have ever had a conversation with somebody outside of who looks like them, believes like them, and talks like them. So I don't know who they are and where they're located. So I have to assume every stranger is that to protect myself, because if I don't, there's a possibility I could lose my life.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. I would never assume that there is a space, especially not in rural areas.
Oh boy,
where that is a fear that I would need to have.
Let me tell you, there is. I came down here from North Carolina. Gainesville is a great city.
Yes.
I love Gainesville. I love the people of Gainesville. But the people of Gainesville will tell you, the moment you leave outside of these city limits, and in certain places within Gainesville, you still have people that have a certain way of thinking. But that percentage of people who aren't really inclusive, it goes up because Gainesville is surrounded by open spaces and rural towns and old ways of living and thinking, where if you travel and you're a graduate student or undergrad student, you probably want to throw on a Gator hoodie. I travel with my old my old federal ID on my dashboard, and it's just it's one of those things where it doesn't protect me, but it's in a space of hoping that I'm not profiled, or it says if you profile me, you might get in trouble. You know what I'm saying? And that's horrible to think that you have to do that.
Again, I would never.
Yeah.
That would never cross my mind if I'm getting in a car that this might be the last time I get in the car, or that I might get profiled. Other than those times at Bonnaroo, I would never assume that I would get profiled that I would get pulled over because I wasn't for anything other than speeding. But the thing about these kinds of conversations is that we can go on for hours following these rabbit trails, and they're not rabbit trails I don't mean that in a negative way. Mm-hmm. These are things that need to be talked about, and the reason why we do get started talking about them is because people don't talk about them.
Right.
But the thing is that in the essence of time, we do kind of need to tie this video up. As you've seen, we've already had to cut a couple times, and we're only getting closer to callbacks here at the Actors Warehouse. So, last thoughts?
Just know we are not perfect,
right?
But no one is.
Correct.
And the thought that you have to be the perfect representation of your entire race to have a conversation, that's not the way you start the conversation. We grow from each other, we learn from each other, and so as you have these conversations or share thoughts and opinions, just come from that space of knowing we're growing together. I will also urge everyone that as we grow together, what we share, if it's in likes and comments, that it's all from a space where if we're reading this online, we know that it comes from a space of trying to bring each other together.
Yes.
Even if it's explaining a side, understanding that as you explain, it is inclusive and it doesn't open for a space of people feeling excluded or that they're right or wrong. Because let's create the only community online that is building up when you have conversations around this. Do it. No trolls.
Let's do it. All that being said, thank you for watching the first episode of Community Conversations, or whatever it be called if we change the name eventually. We don't know when the next episode will come up. Like I said, this is going to be semi-regular, but know that there will be more coming, and we look forward to hearing from you. And if there's any kind of topics that are things that you're thinking about or working through, let us know. We would love to be able to have conversations about things that people actually want to hear about. And we're not just assuming people want to hear about.
We probably talked about them at a self-narrated meeting, just not on camera. So it's we're not the only ones who are wondering, what's this conversation look like? Or tell me your perspective on this.
So with all that being said,
as always, grow your story.
Grow yourself.
Hey.